Hey, hi Stampers. This is Lisa with Queen Bee Creations. Welcome to today's live. Today we are working on a Cascading Panels card, and we've done this several times landscape. We've even done it one portrait like this. I just added an extra layer, and as we're working on book 3, I wanted to simplify things a little bit. You all know that you can just add an extra layer by putting 1/8 of an inch around. But there's also those people who don't like the 1/8 of an inch and want it simpler, and for just learning the pattern in the book, this is how we're going to do it. So I'm excited to show you that one today. I'm also getting asked quite frequently about doing masculine cards, and this Sunrise Sailing bundle is perfect for that. So it comes with the stamp set, the dies, and then the hybrid embossing folder. And what I mean by hybrid is that when we take this die of the sailboat and we find the side where the logo is, we can clip this in just by placing that in there, set our set our cardstock over the top and run it through, and it's going to cut and emboss at the same time. So I had run this through the folder and popped it out. Now, if I had run this without the die, then of course we would get just this dry embossed on whatever cardstock we put in there. If we wanted to stamp this and then die cut it out, we can do that as well. So the die works both ways. You can use it to cut out the stamped image, cut out just a solid flat sailboat, or we can cut it out raised as I did here. So lots of fun opportunities with this bundle. I also incorporated the Spotlight on Nature dies. You guys know I'm a freak for the basic shapes. And so this is one of the ones that I really love. And I used this one here with the like dots and dashes. But it kind of looked like Morse code. dot dash, all the way around. So I used those two, and I die cut some circles that we're going to use as part of our focal point on the top. So there's those two. But then I did another thing. I took and cut half a circle with this out of the blue, and then I laid this long die of the waves across it, and I die cut those waves across the front of this so that I could layer them on top of one another, and then when I set the sailboat on it, it will hopefully look like it's in water, just giving it a little bit of extra something. So you'll notice as I use this die, it's only die cuts the little holes and the top. So I could use a strip of cardstock however tall I wanted, and it's not going to cut off the bottom. So I can create lots of layers on the front of a card using this wave die. And then you even alternate with the other one so it coordinates. And then for our card itself, I have our card base. This one is 8 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then I've scored it at 1 inch, 2 inch, 6 1/4, and 7 1/4. You could also choose to go 1 inch, 2 inch, rotate, and go 1 inch, 2 inch again, because we just want it to kind of gatefold into the middle. So those far inside score lines are going to be valley, and these two on the outside are going to be mountain folds. Okay, so that's going to give us one door that we're going to open, but I wanted a second door for the front of it, and so I needed what I call extension panels. And so I have 2 of those, one for either side, that are 5 inches long, 1 3/4. So I guess 1 3/4 by 5. And then I scored them 1/2 of an inch from either side. So at 1/2 inch and then at 1 1/4. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to kind of zigzag them, and I'm going to do one valley, one mountain. Then I have the actual doors that I'm going to put over the top of that. So my bigger doors are, I guess, 2 inches by 5 inches. So there's 2 of those. And then I have 2 of them that are 1 3/4 by 4 1/2. So that's going to go in the front. And then I've reduced this by 1/4 of an inch to panel over it. So this is 1 3/4 by 4 3/4. So there's 1 of each of those. And then the next 2 are 1 1/2 by 4 1/4. And this is our designer series paper that comes in the color families. And so what I mean by that is you get these patterns that are consistent across all of our colors, and then you can buy them in packs. So you could get all of the brights, all of the subtles, all of the neutrals, that kind of thing. So in this pack, you're going to get all of the neutral colors, and then you're going to get it in the different patterns. So for this one, the front has these leaves, and this one has the flowers, and then you're going to flip it over, and then we have kind of the tie-dye, and then this kind of a marbled look. I really like this one. So that's what we're using here, because it's going to accent our colors nicely, but it's going to be neutral enough that it's not going to distract from the rest of our card design. And then of course we're going to need our belly band, and so this is 1 inch by 11 inches. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just get started adding a couple of these onto their layers. And as I said, this has my regular 1/4 inch difference. You could do an 1/8 of an inch difference and put a panel in between those two, just to give it a little more pop. You can go back and view my previous video to show how that's done. I like to get as many pieces out of the way as I can. You know, or at least group them together so I don't lose them on my desk. The camera rolling tends to do things, I swear. Makes scissors get up and walk away, tape disappear, all that good stuff. Let's go ahead and do this one first. And I want my holes to line up. So what I'm going to do is do liquid glue on this one. Thought I popped all those out. Okay. And then I'm going to lay that on top of here, and I'm going to just kind of gently rotate it around until I've gotten those holes to match up. So now it kind of blends seamlessly. Okay, and then we can go ahead and adhere this to here. And I'm not going to add the boat yet, because I'm going to add the boat towards the end, because I want to be able to push down with my fingers, and this being raised, I don't want to depress that any more than I need to. Hi, Linda. Sorry to hear you had such a crappy holiday. Sorry, that was just shocking. So on our base, I want to adhere these as, like I said, extensions. And so I'm going to go ahead and glue these on here. Let's see how that's done here. I didn't open this up, did I? So you can see how I have pressed the extensions over to the edge here. So this is my back piece, and this is that extension. There's my seam right there. I'm going to do the same thing. And I want it to go this way. So I want my L bracket to be on the inside. And again, we can use either glue, but I like the liquid when I need to move it around and make sure I'm lined up correctly, because I want it flush to the bottom and I want it flush to the side. Okay. So there we have the one. And then it's going to get covered up because we're going to insert those panels right over the top of it. So we won't see that seam. So now we have it fully extended, so I have the area where I can add my 2 panels. So I'm going to add the bigger panel right here, and I'm going to place it inside like that. I'm putting it up to that score line, but not interfering with it. So there's just the teensiest little gap between the edge of my cardstock here and that score line, because I want it to fold nice and easily and not interfere. Okay, so I'm going to mirror that on this other side. Again, right up to that score line, but not cramming it in too deep. Folds nice and easy. Then this one for the outside, I want to actually have the panels flush with the outside edge. So I'm not matching it to the edge of that little extender. I'm matching it all the way to the edge out here. So I'm going to put some adhesive on there. Then I'm going to take my panel and I'm going to set it on top. But as I'm doing this, I'm watching my bottom down here and I'm watching my side out here. And I'm just kind of holding it in place. Again, we're going to mirror on the other side, doing the same thing. A little bit of extra glue there. Remember, that's why we have the adhesive remover, that little piece of rubber that'll rub that right off just as soon as it's dry. Okay, now it does have kind of this little stepped look at the top, but I decided I wanted to accent that a little bit, and so I came in with paper snips. And just kind of angled like that. Okay, and it doesn't need to be exact. And I'm just using my trimmer blade as my guide. I'm starting at the bottom and I'm aiming towards that little thing at the top, or starting at the top and aiming towards that little corner. And just giving it that little bit of a snip. And I just kind of liked that look. So you can either leave those there squared off, or you can trim them down and have them open like that. Okay, now we're going to do some stamping on the inside. And I'm going to do that with the Sunrise Sailing Stamp Set. So I am going to make this a retirement card. So, oops, there we go. So I'm going to bring in some stamps. And these are photopolymer, and that means that they are the clear material. I know sometimes there is some confusion in that we call our red rubber stamps our clear, and then these are photopolymer. And that is just because photopolymer is the material these are made out of, and clear means that they mount on a clear block. And they were called clear before we had the photopolymer stamps. And so I don't think they knew at the time that they were going to, I guess we had cling, but that's our difference. And our photopolymer stamps are indeed different than some of those you can pick up that are acrylic. I don't find that the acrylic stamps hold up as well. They tend to go a little yellow. And let's see, have a tendency to sometimes dry and crack, whereas I have not found that with our photopolymers. Okay, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to see that score line or the grid line underneath, and I'm lining up my words with that, and then I'm going to line up my block with the grid line as well. Bigger. Okay, so here are my ink colors. I'm using Night of Navy because that is my base here. On this card, I used Misty Moonlight and Smoky Slate. This is Night of Navy and Basic Gray. Okay, so we have Night of Navy, Smoky Slate, and Pecan Pie. I could use Basic Gray here, but I decided I wanted to keep it a little more subtle. Both work perfectly fine. And then we're going to stamp onto a piece of basic white that is 4 by 5 1/4. So I'm going to start out with my Night of Navy for my kind of water across the bottom. Remember, our stamp pads are what we call a firm foam. So it's just a gentle tap, tap, tap. You don't want to press too hard. If you do, you may have a tendency to pick up more ink than necessary, which will then transfer over to your project. So just a very gentle tap, tap, tap. You'll also notice that our pads are raised on the edge so that if you have a very large stamp, you can ink up by going multiple directions and it's all going to be even on top. You don't get interference from the case. There's also the fact that when they close, they flip over like this so that the pad inside is actually stored upside down, because we know that liquid will tend to puddle on the bottom. And so by these being upside down, it's actually going to puddle on the top of your pad, keeping them nice and juicy. I often will advise people to also use a birthday candle or chapstick or something to lubricate the rails on the inside of our stamp pads, to keep them nice and fluid so that they open and close really easily. They need to be tight in order to keep the ink dry, but we don't want them to be hard to open. And so in order to make them open easier, it's what I call lubricating, in that I will rub a candle along here and in here. As I said, you can also use chapstick, but something that you can put in there and then move back and forth, and it's going to make them very much easier to open. I open mine like a compact, but you could also take from the backside and pinch. And when you pinch from back here, that's going to gently open that and allow you to give it a grab. So I'm just pushing to the inside, obviously not on the outside, but on the inside I did press there and it popped open. Okay, so inside, away from those side rails, and then pinch. Oh, this one must not be lubricated. Again, that lubrication is really going to help with allowing those to open nice and easily. I also store them out in front of me so that I don't put my elbow into them. Oh, I do need the blue one more time. Okay, so these pieces here, this is going to be the hull of the boat. So I'm going to do that in pecan pie, and I'm going to lay that right on top of the boat itself. I'm kind of going at a little bit of an angle because I am seated and, working on the camera. But to get your best arrangement, to get this lined up nice and neat and perfectly inside, I would recommend standing up and looking down through the stamp. Okay, this one is going to be my color on the sail itself. Oops, see, I didn't get it quite right. Okay. And then I'm going to just accent a teeny bit with some birds up in the corner. So there is my bird stamp. And there we go. Now our final step is going to be the belly band. And so in order to do that, I know that I want to start out with approximately, I don't know, 2 inches, because I want this to kind of end up in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and score that. I'm going to write it 2 inches. And I'm going to bring this over and I'm going to score this again at a little over the 4 1/4. Okay, because I want it to be able to wrap around and allow to have the bulk of the card on the inside. And so I'm kind of going just a little over 4 1/4. And then I'm going to score again. Okay, whenever I do that, you know, when I score up and down on a short side, I kind of tend to, see as you go over, it doesn't quite naturally line up for me right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm holding those two together, keeping everything perpendicular, and then fold back into that corner. That way I know when I wrap it all around, it's going to stay this way. It's not going to be off kinker. Okay. Once I have that to where I want it, we can snip off that excess. And then I'm going to gently wrap it around my card and ensure that it does indeed give me enough room. I can see it was a little shy. Because it's such a thick card. But I'm going to make sure that it lines up. Give it a little bit of a crease, and then we're going to add our adhesive there. And again, I'm adding more than normal because I want it to be good and secure. And I'm going to add some for our focal point. And then we're going to add our sailboat right over the top. And I'm actually going to add this with some dimensionals. You can see I was using scrap paper. And I usually don't show that on camera, but I wanted to remind you guys that just because you mess up one side of the paper doesn't mean you can't flip it over and use the other side, even if you've put it through the printer. We can still use it. It's still cardstock, right? Add that right to our focal point in the middle here. Okay. So there is our card in Light of Navy, and here it is in Misty Moonlight. And to put it into the belly band, I kind of have a tendency to give it a little bit of an arc. I don't know if you can see that I'm doing that. So that I can, you know, pull it in and make sure that as I load it in, it's not kind of smashing the corners. And that is today's Cascading Panels portrait card. Notes. If you come back on Thursday, we will be doing a drapery fold, which I had in front of me a minute ago. Oh, here we go. So we know that Thursdays are my Stamping Made Simple. And so this is a nice simple card that does not involve die cuts and can be done with minimal supplies, but is still going to be a little bit of a fun factor. Okay, so that will be on Thursday. It's already been scheduled out there on YouTube. So make sure that you go take a look at that, and you can hit the little button to notify you when I go live with that. I'm going to be sending out a newsletter later today because there is some exciting news coming up. Not only do we have the new product that was released last week, but there's some more sales stuff coming up, and a new class I have coming. Lots of good stuff. So you want to make sure that you are paying attention to my newsletter, and I want to thank those of you who purchase from me, because purchasing from me helps keep me in business. If you want me to stick around and be able to do these fun videos and teach you all these things, I kind of need to make some money. So thank you to those who are supporting that cause. Okay, I will see you on Thursday. Thanks so much. Bye.